All right, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Tanner Watt. I'm a municipal program specialist with local authority services based out of Ontario. We're going to be hearing today from Angelo Cleric, program manager for the City of Toronto, and Darren Scott, VersaCharge sales manager with Siemens. We're going to be sharing some information on electric vehicles in municipal fleets, how to operate them, and how to keep them charged. Siemens products are available through the Canoe Procurement Group, which helps to lower costs and simplify procurement for municipalities. We have a few other webinars scheduled for this fall. I'll drop a link in the chat to the page of the LAS website where those are listed. You can take a look at those and register for any you find interesting. There's also going to be a webinar coming up on November 30th with the Ontario Municipality of Transportation, and that's regarding new funding for electric vehicle charging stations, specifically for municipalities. And we'll put the link for that in the chat box as well. That isn't one of our webinars, that those who are attending today would probably be interested in that one as well. So a couple of housekeeping notes for this webinar. We are recording it. We'll be sending out a link to the video archive either this afternoon or tomorrow. After the presentations, we're going to have a Q&A period. For that, we will use the Q&A feature built into Zoom. At the bottom of your screen, there's a little box that you tap on with Q&A on it. Type in your question at any time throughout the presentation, and at the end, we'll go through and answer those. We're also going to be sending out a survey to everybody who responded. We'll ask you to please fill that out if you can. It helps us to make sure that these webinars are doing what you need them to. So with that, I will hand it off to Angelo.
Thank you, Tanner. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Angelo Cleric. I'm a program manager for City of Toronto Sustainable Fleet Initiatives. I will, in the next 5 to 10 minutes, I will provide an overview and some of the highlights of the experiences that we've gone through so far in driving our fleet to net zero, with the specific goals, objectives, and some of the experiences we've gone through in terms of transitioning our fleets to zero emission vehicle, and also implementing and deploying the charging infrastructure to support that transition, as electric vehicles are currently the most viable option in zero emission vehicle space. Just an overview of a sustainable City of Toronto Fleets Plan, which the latest updated version was adopted by City of Toronto Council back in May. Our goal is to transition city fleets to sustainable net zero operations by 2040, including 45% emissions reductions by 2025 and 65% reduction by 2030. We do have 3 key objectives as part of this, achieving this goal, is to transition 20% of our city-owned fleet to zero emission vehicles by 2025, 50% by 2030. The second one would be resilient fleet assets and operations by 2040, and also net zero procurement by 2040. And net zero procurement in this case refers to everything other than the vehicles. Moving on, the City of Toronto fleet is the largest municipal fleet in Canada and one of the largest and most diverse fleets in North America. Currently, we have just under 11,000 vehicles and equipment in operations. And about 7% of them are zero emission vehicle, mostly, as I mentioned, electric vehicle. You can see some of the examples there are transit buses, cargo vans, pickup trucks, passenger vehicles that we currently have. And we also have multiple off-road applications for turf maintenance and the facility management. On the left side, you can also see the breakdown of our fleet. And as you can tell, even though largest percentage of the vehicles is light duty vehicles, which includes the emergency management vehicles, about 86% of our emissions are produced by our medium and heavy duty vehicles, which combined account for about 40% vehicles of our total fleet. So far and in the near future, we have been going through a number of zero emission vehicle, especially medium and heavy duty vehicle demos and trials. as those are, as I mentioned, the heaviest emitters in our fleet, and also are the most challenging in terms of the procurement based on the current availability of the models and the applications, as well as the much more complex requirements where it comes to the charging infrastructure. So these are some of the examples of the vehicles that we have or are currently testing as a Class 8 trucks and tractor trailers, delivery trucks, garbage collection trucks, street sweepers, buses for our library applications, and some other smaller applications that we have. In terms of the charging infrastructure, we have over the last 2 years undergone a significant expansion and modernization of our charging infrastructure, corporate one, for light and medium duty vehicles. The locations have been identified, the key facilities that where the vehicles are operating out of and delivering city services, and those have all been equipped so far with the certain quantities of mostly level 2 chargers, and in some cases low level DC fast chargers. Currently, as I stated here, we have about 194 charge ports at 86 locations, and our plan is to have 850 charge ports at more than 100 locations by the end of 2025. As I mentioned earlier, in terms of the vehicle, the charging infrastructure for medium and heavy duty vehicles is a lot more complex and requires more advanced planning and the more significant capital investment. We are learning from our transit applications that depot charging is one of the, if not the most efficient financially and operationally approach to establishing the charging infrastructure for medium and heavy duty vehicles. Not just for the upfront capital investment, but also for the operation and management of that infrastructure. What you see here is just some of the examples of the types of chargers, heavy duty chargers that you have on the right, but also one of the key components that I'll talk a little bit later as well in more detail is the energy storage and management facilities, which you see some of the examples in a photo on the left. In terms of the lessons learned, I've divided it in a few categories here. So planning is a critical component to your success. A holistic approach that takes into account not just vehicles, but also the charging infrastructure requirements, including power generation, storage, distribution, and management is critical. Procurement, another critical component of zero emission technology adoption is procurement, and that includes vehicles, charging equipment, and electrical infrastructure, and associated services. Integrated procurement of these components requires a broad, holistic systems perspective approach, ensuring interoperability and sustainability of the infrastructure that you're going to be employing. And this is especially into reference to the medium and heavy duty vehicles, which I said that require a significant capital investment upfront. In terms of the funding, transition into zero emission vehicle requirements requires, as I mentioned, large upfront capital investment for both vehicles and infrastructure, especially today where availability and the type of models especially in the medium and heavy duty space is limited. We're still experiencing, in some cases, significant price differences between the electric options and the internal combustion option. So that covering that cost, in addition to establishing the infrastructure to support these vehicles, is a significant requirement upfront, which is why building in our experience, building existing and establishing and expanding partnerships with the federal and provincial government isn't important for ensuring sustainable funding streams for requirements of the transitioning your fleet to zero emission vehicle. In terms of the outreach and education, a critical component of any adoption of new technologies is the user adoption. Early and frequent outreach and educational programs with your internal users and all the other stakeholders, including the decision makers, is crucial to success of the overall plan, as you're looking for a high percentage of early adopters and also an ongoing education would help with the optimum use of the assets that are implemented, so that you can maximize the benefits that these type of zero emission vehicles and the associated technologies and their implementation bring to the organizations, such as yours. Sustainment, critical component of continuing to on a road of transitioning to zero emission, is revisiting all of the strategies and the approaches that you have started on the vehicle procurement, on the implementation of your charging infrastructure, and ensuring that the systems, as they are integrated and very codependent across the space of vehicles, infrastructure, users, and the broader supply of energy supply, is something that can be sustained, and it's also climate resilient for the future. This only, in case of the City of Toronto, who has the responsibility for our emergency response and management broadly within our city, is important to ensure that those capabilities are maintained and enhanced as we transition to zero emission vehicles, and not jeopardized because of it. In terms of the some of the benefits that, generally speaking, transitioning to net zero and to zero emission vehicles as a stepping stone to that, is our by City of Toronto Council declared the climate emergency in early 2019, and that has moved our commitment from net zero 2050 to net zero 2040. This will enable us to eliminate over 240 kilotons of additional natural gas earlier, which would result in many benefits. Some of those is improved air quality, which directly and indirectly contributes to improved health within the city and around the city. Improved safety features of the new electric vehicles and zero emission vehicles are new technology implementations are ensuring that they're safer for operators and the public as they operate in the public environments. And also in terms of the corporate sustainability, we are ensuring that our assets are sustainable and climate resilient for many years to come, and are able to support the delivery of city services that we currently undertake, as well as ensuring the financial sustainability of the city operations and the services that require vehicles for their provision. The last thing I wanted to cover at the high level is some of the dependencies for undertaking such a important and complex initiatives, such as transitioning your fleet to zero emission vehicles. Industry readiness is one of the things that we often discuss in many different forums, and city's ability or any organization's ability to procure zero emission vehicles is largely dependent on the auto industry readiness to produce and supply viable zero emission vehicle options and quantities, especially for medium and heavy duty vehicles. The other component is funding. So as we move through the challenging economic environments, not just for the city such as ours, but many organizations, we face a lot of challenges, and ensuring that our programs are sustainable and properly funded is one of the key aspects of that of those initiatives. The government regulations, in terms of what this refers to, as I'm sure many of you are aware, federal government does have currently regulations and sales targets for the light duty vehicles in terms of the obligations of the manufacturers, the percentages of the zero emission vehicles as a percentage of their sales. But we are working with other organizations and levels of government on ensuring that the federal government establishes the same standards or similar standards for the medium and heavy duty vehicle sales, which will provide an incentive to manufacturers and dealers of those vehicles to bring to the market these types of vehicles sooner and in a larger quantity. In terms of economy, as you can see, we go through different phases of the economic struggles, and currently we do have a certain set of challenges that do directly impact the ability to fund and finance things, and also in terms of the cost of the materials and services that are available in the market, which directly impact the cost of the delivery of your actions and strategies for transition into zero emission vehicles. And I mentioned in the earlier one some of the lessons learned. User adoption is critical, and through the outreach and education, it's important to address those things early and often to ensure that the users of your vehicles and equipment, zero emission vehicles, are properly trained and educated on optimum utilization of those assets to maximize their benefits. And on the workforce, the last topic that I wanted to mention, as our workforce is aging and moving on to their well-deserved retirements in some cases, and as new technologies that are emerging, it's really important to ensure that our workforce is constantly trained and upgraded in terms of their skills, and that the new fresh resources, assets, staffing assets are brought in to ensure the sustainment of the actions that you are implementing and undertaking for the transition of your fleet to zero emission vehicles. That is for me. I'll hand it over to Darren. Darren.
Thank you, Angelo. Appreciate the presentation. I really learned a lot. Again, I am Darren Scott. I am the VersiCharge Sales Manager at Siemens Canada. I'm just going to share my screen here. So just as we're getting started, Angelo touched on many of the key kind of points and features that you may be considering or mulling over at this point in time, but sort of my mind, these are the kind of top questions that you're probably thinking about, or the people think about when they're looking to electrify their fleet. You know, which vehicles are we trying to convert to electric? What's the route they're taking, the distance traveled by the current ICE vehicles that we're using? You know, make sure that we can then ensure the electric vehicles can do the same routes. You know, what is the appropriate number of chargers that we would need for our electric vehicles based on the routes? Will our current electrical infrastructure be enough to support the additional chargers? And if the charger is going to be accessible to public or fleet users, and if they're accessible to public, how do we, handle that? And then how do we track or bill internal public users? So these are some of the questions I hope to address as we kind of walk through. So we'll start off with sort of the hardware first. Depending on the charging infrastructure and the vehicles, there are different types of chargers. And there's the commercial, what we call the level 2 chargers. Now, every electric vehicle does come with a standard level 1 charger that plugs into a 120 volt outlet, but it takes up to 24 hours to charge a normal passenger type vehicle and really isn't sufficient for any of the heavy duty vehicles. Then there's the DC fast chargers. Those are typically level 3 faster chargers, typically found on en routes, gas stations, those sorts of things. And they're intended for quick charging light vehicles, but also the heavier vehicles as well. And then we have, for behind the fence, specific DC heavy duty plug chargers as well. They're available in the marketplace. And then there's software that can control all the chargers and ensure they're doing what they need to do and billing users, that sort of thing. So going into a bit more detail on the level 2 chargers, we often consider these are long stay chargers. Basically, they come in different power outputs from anywhere from 7.2 kilowatts up to 11.5 or even 19.2 kilowatt chargers, just again, depending on the size. For a level 2 charger, charging time is typically 8 to 12 hours. That's why it's more considered a long stay charger. They do have connections to connect to the internet, then connect to that backend software that can do the billing, restricted access, those different types of things as well. One thing to consider is there's proprietary chargers, hardware and software, but there's also open source or open charge point protocol compliant chargers in the marketplace. And the OCPP compliant or open charge point protocol chargers allow operation of the hardware with any software that is OCP compliant. And why this is important in my perspective is it basically gives the customer or yourselves choice that at the end of the day, if you're using a software, it's not fully meeting your needs or doesn't have certain features that you require, or the price point isn't attractive anymore, you then have the option to switch to different software providers that are also OCP compliant. So if you choose a company to work with that offers OCPP compliant or open source hardware, it then gives you choice of software down the road. And then again, just making sure that you're getting the proper features and price points that you're happy with. You can also do billing or on-off control, RFID reader access, QR code access, and app access with the level 2 chargers. The level 2 chargers typically are NEMA 3 or NEMA 4 rated, so meant for outdoor use. There are different cord lengths, so that's a consideration to take into account when you are picking a level 2 charger. And then there's the new North American standard handle, typically the one that Tesla uses, that seems to be converting over. Traditionally, it was a J1772 handle. So if that's depending on the vehicles that you're looking to use or future-proofing the chargers, that's a consideration as well. What type of handle is on the vehicle as well? So that's just some considerations to take into account when looking at the level 2 chargers. When we move into the DC fast chargers, there's a wide range of power outputs, anywhere from say 30 kilowatt up to 360 kilowatts. And depending on the charger and the manufacturer, you can have either single port or dual port. And in some cases, those dual port can do parallel charging. The picture you see here is one of our chargers, and it does do that parallel charging where it can charge 2 vehicles at the same time. It does split the power output, but you can still charge 2 vehicles at the same time. So it kind of optimizes or increases your ability to charge multiple vehicles. And when it comes to incentives, I believe many of the incentives are based on per port or charging handle. So if you're able to charge 2 vehicles with the charger, you can theoretically get double the incentive or incentive per port for the charger for the same installation. So install 1 charger, dual port, and you get double the incentive. And it's that ability to charge 2 vehicles at the same time is the differentiator. And also with the level 3, there is that same proprietary hardware or OCP compliant hardware. So that's again another consideration when you're looking at adding chargers for your fleet. Do you want open source where it gives you more choice, or do you want to go with a proprietary model that's kind of designed to work together but may limit your choices down the road? And then there's different liquid-cooled or air-cooled chargers and the different footprint based on that. So the air-cooled chargers tend to take up more space, whereas liquid-cooled take up a little less space. Again, options for credit card readers, display screens. So lots of different varieties of options on the chargers, depending on which manufacturer, again, you choose to go with. With ours, we do have screens on ours as well, and they are RFID compliant. You can add credit card readers, and they are OCP compliant chargers as well. So lots of different choices, lots of different options, all things to consider when choosing a charger. And you may be thinking to yourself, oh, I'm sort of familiar with the different levels of chargers, but even what you just told me, I'm not sure which one still makes the most sense for our application. One thing you can look at, and again, when you're choosing a company to work with, can they offer some sort of consulting, or what Siemens we call a front-end engineering and design, or a feed study that can look at my route, look at the vehicles I plan to use, how much time we have to charge those vehicles, how much power is available on site, how much power can I save with the setup, how much greenhouse gas reduction can I optimize? All those sorts of questions can be answered with this front-end engineering design or feed study. And sort of it's a circular, you start off with kind of the route study, then look at the charging simulation. You can design even an energy twin, so you can create a digital version, of the charging infrastructure and implement it that way. There's a consultation period where you can discuss the different options and figure out what works best, and then finally a design and budget. And really the goal of these feed studies is to what's feasible for your site and the vehicles you're using, as well as how to optimize it. And this day and age, budgets are always really tight. We always want to spend our money wisely, and these types of studies can really help ensure that you are spending your money wisely, putting in the charging infrastructure you need, kind of no more, no less, that'll meet your long-term goals, and then how you can build on it later on. And kind of one of the neat things, at least with our offering, it's a bit of a menu of options. So we kind of have 10 different little subsets of the feed study. And depending on your budget and what your needs are, or perhaps some work you've already done on your side or your internal capabilities, it allows us to kind of pick and choose which ones make the most sense. So you can sort of say, well, I don't need, point one, a vehicle route study. We've already done that, but I do need to understand the grid connection. So I want that piece. We don't need the virtual twin, but I would like to understand a financial operating model. So you can kind of pick and choose from the menu, and so apply to what makes sense for your application, but also what fits your budget as well. So lots of different options. And again, the end of the day, the whole goal of one of these feed studies is to help ensure that you're spending the money that you have wisely and putting in the infrastructure required for your chargers for now and in the future as well. So it kind of really helps simplify that process and gives you confidence when you then go ahead and make those purchases. And in terms of actual installation of the chargers themselves, we sort of have their traditional installations where we have chargers on a post, either a post with or without a cable management system. They can be wall mounted, or you can do sort of a custom installation, build sort of an own little structure that you kind of see in the top right there, where it's kind of a board with a little roof on it, and have the chargers that way. So lots of different applications that way for the chargers. So when thinking about your sites and how you want to install them, these are things to consider. If it's a more complex site or a much larger site, and you want to be able to install a large amount of chargers for your fleet, but ripping up the parking lot isn't really feasible. It causes too much disruption. There are applications out there, and the one that Siemens does have, but also available from perhaps some other companies, is there's a specialized kind of canopy solution where basically you run pylons into the ground. You can install the posts on top of those pylons and then run all the electricity through the bus bars on the top on the cross members, and then it runs down to the chargers on each side of the post. And what can be achieved by this is, one, it reduces excavation because you only have to excavate to the first post, and then everything runs again above. I apologize, my computer's kind of taking over. So the electricity runs, or the power lines run to that first post, then across the top, then down to the charger. So there's no need for digging up the entire parking lot. And just for an example, this kind of solution we're looking up here on the screen can be installed in 3 days. So instead of months of having the parking lot dug up and trying to run cable and pour cement and all these different things, instead you just install these. They're expandable, so you can add on to them and add more posts and more chargers and more cross members. And the really cool part is you can actually take it apart. So if you're at a certain site, you might be moving in the future, so you want to consider that. This customizable solution allows you to actually take it down, put it back together on a different site. And again, it just then saves a lot of cost because you're able to reuse all the components that you initially invested in. So just a different application or installation piece that I just want to make everyone aware of. And again, there's probably more of these kind of innovative solutions out there, but this is kind of one that Siemens offers. And then when it comes to controlling and operating the chargers, you need the software. And basically it's cloud-based software. So the chargers would need to be able to connect to the internet, to then connect to that cloud-based software. And depending on the company you go to work with, there's kind of different packages. Using our Siemens examples here, where right off the bat, as soon as the charger is connected, you automatically get what we call our care package, which allows for device registration, remote troubleshooting, but also automatic charger updates. So anytime that there's a new firmware or new features can be added through the software to the chargers, we can push those out. So just something, again, to consider when you're looking to which company you want to work with. Can they give me those firmware updates? Can they ensure that I'm going to get the full life out of my charger, because they're going to keep it up to date and with the newest features available in the marketplace, and anything else that I might need, even though if I don't know if I need it now, I'll be able to add it in the future. So it really does future-proof the chargers, having that ability to update the chargers remotely. Then kind of moving over to the next point, basically what we call our charge package, might be called something different with a different company, but basically allows you kind of that monitoring, data reports, but also billing services. We'll actually process the credit cards for anyone from a public perspective or anyone that needs to pay to use the chargers. We can also set up different profiles, so fleet users or anyone who's supposed to be using the chargers as part of the fleet program wouldn't have to pay, that they can still access the chargers using the same methodology, but based on their profile, they don't pay. Whereas, sort of those public users, if you want to give access to the chargers, or the chargers are in a place where public can access them, and you want to allow them to use them, you can set up different profiles. Then there's also an owner dashboard, so you can go in and see all your chargers, and I have a couple screenshots of that on the next couple slides. And then for our application, there's what we call an add-on or control package where we can do load balancing. So if there isn't sufficient power for the amount of chargers that make sense for your site, but you want to be able to add all those chargers, but just reduce the power to them when necessary, that's what the control package in our instance would do. So basically, if you have, say, 4 chargers in a group, and all 4 in use, it would just reduce the power output. And then as cars kind of come on and off, it would adjust the power accordingly. So it gives you a lot more flexibility with the existing infrastructure to add more chargers and still be able to charge multiple vehicles without risk of overwhelming the existing infrastructure. And just some different ways to access the chargers. This is an example. So in this particular example, there's the RFID way to access it using these open source chargers and software. There can also be a QR code on the charger itself. So anyone who wants to use the charger can come up, scan the QR code, and then depending on their profile, if they're authorized to use them or if they're supposed to pay, would take them to the appropriate payment page or access page. And in this case, there's even a 1-800 number. So if a person doesn't have a public user, doesn't have a smartphone, but they just have a regular cell phone, they can actually call the number on the screen there and ask to access the card that way, take the credit card payment over the phone. So lots of different options for accessing it. And there's also an app as well. And again, because, using us as an example, Siemens, that since we're open source and we're trying to make it as easy as possible for users to access it, we try to give as many options as possible, but none of them are required. You don't need to download the app. You don't need to have an RFID card. You could just, scan the QR code or use the telephone number, but those options are available for easier use down the road. So again, more choice when you come with that kind of open source software. This is just an example of the owner dashboard, kind of gives you an overview of all of the chargers that belong to your fleet, whether they're at one site or multiple sites. It can aggregate all that data into a macro level where you can see everything all at once. And you can also drill down into individual chargers, and so you can see the behavior and how much power is being used, and if the chargers are in use for an individual charger as well. And this is an example, lastly, of an actual data from an individual charger out of that larger group. So it allows you to see a micro level and a macro level of the chargers to fully understand what's happening with all the chargers in your fleet. And then in terms of warranty support, I know that's a big concern. We want to make sure that, again, you're getting the full life out of your chargers, that you're able to get the proper warranty and support. And some different support considerations to take into account. So when these chargers are installed, if they are to be connected to the internet and that backend software, that whole startup and commissioning process is something that needs to be completed. So whether it's something that you plan to do in-house or you want to outsource it, or an expectation of the company that you're going to purchase the chargers from, can they offer these services? Can they help us commission the chargers? Can they complete the work on our behalf? Can they help our electrician do it? Whatever kind of makes the most sense for your application, those are the kind of questions and things you want to be thinking about when deciding who to work with. There's also the maintenance piece. Siemens level 2 chargers don't require maintenance, but some level 2 manufacturers do require a maintenance schedule in order to maintain the warranty. So that's a consideration as well. Do I have to worry about that maintenance piece, or do I want a maintenance-free charger? Can they do remote monitoring and diagnostics? Can they do those remote firmware updates to keep the chargers future-proofed? Typically, we recommend visual inspections and cleaning. Is that something that you want as part of your maintenance package, or is that something you want to do in-house? Just, again, different things to consider. And then there's the on-site support. Is the company I'm working with, can they provide on-site support? Do they have local resources? And what does that look like? Is it covered into the warranty period, or is that something that's additional cost? Do we want to use internal resources, or outsource it to a third party, or go with the manufacturer? Are there spare parts? Are there spare parts required? And what about replacement units? Do you want to keep some on hand in case the charger does malfunction and needs to be replaced? Or do you want to have the manufacturer supply that when it does happen? Just, again, lots of different things to consider when you're looking at your fleet and moving into that electrification piece. And then lastly, how do they deliver that warranty support? What is the warranty period? Some chargers are warranted for 1 year. Siemens is warranted for 3 years. Is the warranty for parts only or parts and labor? Again, just different things to consider. And then the technical support. Do they have online support tools? Do they have 24-hour phone support? do they have resources to support my infrastructure? So again, these to me, in my mind, are the important kind of key factors when choosing who you're going to work with long term. Is the company, can they do just one small part of these things? Are they only supplying the hardware and that's it? Or can they do all these other things that are going to make the whole conversion to electric vehicles a lot simpler? So that's really all I have from my side. So I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to, I believe John is going to take over for Tanner.
It's Jeff, but thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Darren. Thanks, Angelo. Very interesting presentations. My name is Jeff Barton. I'm the Energy and Asset Services Manager with LAS, and I'll be moderating the Q&A and wrapping things up today for everyone. I have a couple of questions to start. While I'm asking them, if any of our viewers have questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A and we'll get to them shortly. First question I have is for Toronto, for Angelo. You mentioned the ability of the grid to handle the heavy duty charging infrastructure, and we read in the news this week, I read a CTV news article that said that may represent a challenge as we roll it out across Ontario and presumably across Canada, because I know we have viewers from across Canada on this webinar. My question is, how did you coordinate with Toronto Hydro, and were there any challenges with them being able to meet your initial installations? Are they able to service them at this current time, or did they have to beef up their grid to handle that?
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for the question. We are working with our utility, Toronto Hydro, very closely on all of our initiatives. So in terms of the grid capacity, as far as the Toronto area, and in some cases, Ontario Power Generation has made statements along those lines. At least for the initial short and mid-term, the grid capacity is not an issue. It's the endpoint capacity. So most of our buildings, and I'm sure in many other jurisdictions, are built long time ago when the energy requirements output at those sites was never envisioned to be at such a high level that we now need for electric vehicles, even the level 2, but especially for medium and heavy infrastructure. So when I was referring to the large upfront capital investment, that's mostly for upgrading the sites themselves, rather than and the service coming in, rather than the capacity of the grid to handle it. So the grid is capable of handling a lot before it becomes an issue. But of course, if you're looking for something that we all need to do to reach our targets 2040 or 2050, yes, it will become more important to address those as we go ahead. But the relationship with your local utility is critical.
And Jeff, if I might jump in for a second.
Yeah.
And I know that grid capacity is a huge concern. If the amount of charging needs exceeds the power available, but there's different solutions as well as what the Toronto Hydro or any hydro company do to beef up the infrastructure. There's also battery technology where you can have batteries on site that can store power during off-peak times and then use that to charge vehicles down the road. Even a bit more, bigger scale, but microgrids are an option as well, combining solar, wind, or even different types of microgrids locally on site to generate power locally. There's also software. A lot of softwares, I know we have a fleet software program that can actually help optimize the charging so it can work within the infrastructure limitations. So instead of worrying about these big infrastructure upgrades, a lot of times it can be handled through software and then addition of batteries and that sort of thing as well. So there's lots of different options. Again, choosing which company you work with that has that kind of expertise can kind of help with that whole kind of more complex issues.
Excellent.
And just additionally add to what Darren has said, we are utilizing all those things that he mentioned.
Okay. No, that's good to know, and good for our listeners to keep in mind that it's internal to their buildings that they may have to review and pump the dollars in to upgrade that. So at this point, sounds like the grid should be able to handle the initial, and I think as technology evolves, it should be we should be in good shape. So I do have a question for Darren as well, regarding the the software, you mentioned that it runs on internet, but a lot of our municipalities throughout Ontario, Toronto's an exception, they're very built up and urban, but for the rural ones, they may not have internet available, and even some have dead spots for cell phone, where cell phones don't even work, way up in the north. And I'm sure that's the same across Canada. I'm wondering, what options are there? Do you have to connect to the internet to be able to use these chargers, or could you have them kind of islanded and go in and maintain them on a regular basis in person?
Yeah, absolutely. For example, Siemens chargers do come out of the box set to what we call free and open. So you could just put power to them, and then any vehicle that's plugged in can charge. What you lose without having the software piece is ability to restrict access or to bill users. So in those kind of particular cases, if you only want the fleet or the customers who are supposed to use them, you want to kind of them in a behind the fence secure location, or give away free power to anyone who can stop and use the chargers is kind of the other option. Our chargers and a lot of chargers come with SIM card capabilities built into it. So you can add a SIM card and you can switch out providers. So if, Rogers has a dead spot there, but Bell works, you can use a Bell SIM card. So SIM cards are an option, Ethernet cables, lots of different connectivity options that way. But when it comes right down to it, you don't need software to run them. You just kind of lose that additional functionality without that internet connection.
Okay, that's good to know.
Just to add, if I can,
yeah.
City of Toronto has chosen to use SIM card connectivity.
Okay, so that's using cell data, basically.
Yeah. They act like cell phones, basically. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we do have a question come in, and I believe it would be for Darren. Does the CARE connection, so your software connection to BAS, support open BAS protocol, and can it be integrated with any BAS platform, or is it limited to the Siemens BAS platform?
Our chargers, I believe it's a Modbus question. Our chargers are Modbus compliant, so we can use Modbus, and even one of the features we do offer is that Modbus is able to connect into building management systems. So it's an open source. We kind of offer the capabilities, and then we can work with the programmers to design what works best for the client.
Okay, excellent. I don't see other questions coming in, but while we're waiting to see if there are others, I just wanted to make a little bit of a plug here. I want to thank Toronto for their presentation. It's great to see your leadership. You're probably one of the ones at the forefront of converting your fleets in Ontario. And it's great to be able to rely on your expertise. The plug I want to make as well is that Siemens is a approved vendor under the Canoe program, and that is the reason for this webinar, is to bring attention to what is available under Canoe and the technologies and how different municipalities are using them, including City of Toronto. So Siemens is an approved vendor for the EV charging. And what that means is basically our municipalities across Canada don't necessarily need to run and do their own RFP to procure for an EV charging system, or even the feed study or the software, because it's already been done. And Siemens is one of several, but I know you are one that has the open source protocol. So that kind of sets you a little bit ahead here. And so if there is interest in that, you can go to the LAS webpage and check out our Canoe listing of vendors and search for Siemens, and you'll see Darren's contact info there. I do know as well that we'll be sending out a email at the end of this webinar with some key contact info, a link to the recording, and you can always respond to Tanner or any one of us if you have further questions. I'm just doing a quick scan, and it doesn't appear there are other questions, so you must have done a great job with your presentation. So Unless something comes in the next few seconds, I think we're going to wrap this up. I just want to announce that we do have our next webinar is coming up on November 23rd, and that will be talking about the heavy fleets that Angelo referred to. We're going to be talking with Navistar, who provides some of those big truck bodies. So, and they have a they're going to talk about their plans for their electrification. So, Angelo, maybe you'd like to join if you're looking for heavy equipment and the options that are available. That is on November 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
We're dealing with Navistar and many others already, so I'm sure.
Okay, perfect.
Plus we are participating in some other intergovernmental groups that are dealing with these type of issues.
Okay, excellent. So you'll be a great resource to our listeners if they have questions about the vehicle side of things. They can contact you.
Yeah, and I welcome anyone who participated today, and hopefully it's the lack of question is for the reason that you mentioned, that we did a good job presenting, not putting everyone to sleep. But they're more than welcome to reach out. We have gone through a lot, and we still have a lot to go through. And we'd be happy to share the experience, which we're already doing with some other jurisdictions.
Excellent. Well, with that, Angelo, Darren, thank you very much for joining us today, sharing your expertise and spending time with us and helping our listeners understand what's involved in installing these chargers and electrifying their fleet. With that,
thank you all.
Hope everyone has a great afternoon. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.